Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Over the past few days, Russia has been stepping up attacks on Ukraine, but the biggest blow to Kyiv has come from the US. Donald Trump has cut military aid. He said he won't put up with Zelensky. What does this mean for the war? Can Ukraine keep fighting without American money and weapons? And can Europe fill the gap? They're working on what's being called a bomb bank, a European bomb bank. They're also stepping up defense spending. But it will take years and a lot of cash to make a difference. Meanwhile, Trump has dropped bombshells elsewhere too in the form of trade tariffs on Canada, Mexico and China. All three countries are retaliating, global markets are bleeding and consumers are bracing for inflation. Wherever in the world you are, including America, you, the consumer, will bear the brunt of this. It seems the only country Trump wants to make concessions to is Russia, raising the old question, is he a Russian asset? A former Soviet intelligence officer says the KGB had recruited Trump many years ago. And amid all this chaos, guess who wants to help sort things out? Britain's King Charles. He fancies himself a diplomat now. Also in focus, how China's DeepSeek is changing the AI landscape and causing major losses to American tech giants. How Elon Musk's politics is hurting his business. Why half the world's population will be overweight or obese by 2050. And Prime Minister Modi inaugurates Vantara, the world's largest wildlife rescue center. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. In Pakistan, 2 suicide bombers detonate and breach the wall of a military facility. The attack took place in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. A group affiliated with the Pakistani Taliban has claimed responsibility. This is the second such attack in the restive region in less than a week. Japan battling its worst wildfire in half a century. One person has been killed, nearly 4,000 people have been evacuated and several buildings have been damaged. Military helicopters are trying to douse the fire which is spreading. Last year, Japan experienced its hottest summer on record. Drama inside Serbia's parliament. Opposition lawmakers light flares and discharge suspected tear gas. This was to support the ongoing anti-corruption protests. For months now, Serbia has been rocked by student-led protests, which started after a train station roof collapsed last year, killing 15 people. Arab leaders gather in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, to discuss alternatives to US President Donald Trump's Gaza plan. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince MBS is not attending the Arab League summit. Trump wants Washington to take over the war-torn Strip and move the Palestinians living there elsewhere. Germany to suspend aid to Rwanda. This is over Kigali backing the M23 rebels in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Berlin has condemned the rebels for violating DR Congo's sovereignty. The UK has also suspended most bilateral aid to Rwanda, while Canada has imposed sanctions on the East African country. And India take on Australia in the semi-final of the Champions Trophy. Rohit Sharma's team need less than 50 runs for victory. Virat Kohli becomes India's highest run scorer in the tournament's history. South Africa will take on New Zealand in the second semi-final tomorrow.
If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
Donald Trump is going for the jugular. He's hitting Ukraine where it hurts them most. Military aid. Because Kyiv may be fighting the war, but the US is bankrolling it. Weapons, intelligence, training, most of it is coming from America. Not anymore though. because US President Donald Trump has paused all military aid to Ukraine. We are talking about critical items here like bullets, missiles, rockets and launchers. Now, most of this was transported over land. First, the shipments would reach Poland. From there, they would cross over to Ukraine. That's how it worked. But since yesterday, those shipments have stopped moving. Ukraine will not get fresh weapons from the United States of America, and frankly, this is not surprising. Trump allies have consistently demanded cutting military aid. And after Friday's fiasco at the White House, it was just a matter of time. Listen to how the Americans have defended it. I'm quoting, "The president has been clear that he is focused on peace. We need our partners to be committed to that goal as well. We are pausing and reviewing our aid to ensure that it is contributing to a solution." It's basically a pressure tactic. Zelensky has refused to sue for peace with Russia, so Trump is putting pressure on him. His endgame is quite obvious. He wants Zelensky to come to the negotiating table. And if he doesn't, Trump wants to find someone who will. He says Zelensky may not be around for long.
I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. Now, maybe somebody doesn't want to make a deal. And if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long. That person will not be listened to very long because I believe that Russia wants to make a deal.
So Trump is saying Zelensky may not be around for long. Now, we haven't heard from Zelensky yet, but Ukraine's prime minister has responded to all of this. He says Kyiv will hold out despite Trump's move. He is also hoping that Europe will step up. Meanwhile, Russia is thrilled. They're calling it a move aimed at peace.
It is obvious that the United States has been the main supplier of this war so far. If the United States stops being an arms supplier or suspends these supplies, it will probably be the best contribution to the cause of peace.
So what will be the impact of this pause? And can Europe step up to save Ukraine? First things first, this is not unprecedented. It happened in early 2024 as well. That's when the US Congress blocked an aid package for Ukraine. Back then, the same thing happened. Shipments dried up in Poland, so Ukraine had to dig deeper into their reserves, and for a while, all of this helped Russia. The Russians made gains around the city of Kyiv. Finally, the American aid was approved in April, and only then could Ukraine put up a meaningful fight. So expect the same again. Experts say Ukraine can keep fighting for 6 months, but after that, they will need fresh supplies. If not from the US, then somewhere else. Which brings us to the next question. Could Europe play that role? The EU president says the bloc is ready. She proposed a new plan today. It's called Rearm Europe. That's the plan. The aim is to spend $841 billion on defense. $841 billion. That's almost as much as America spends. Listen to this.
We are in an era of rearmament. And Europe is ready to massively boost its defense spending, both to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security. This is a moment for Europe, and we are ready to step up.
This plan has multiple parts, like allowing EU countries to breach their fiscal deficit cap and loaning $157 billion to member states. It's a very ambitious plan, but it's yet to be approved. EU leaders will be meeting on Thursday for a summit. Let's see if they agree to it. But even if they do, this is not going to be enough, because the European Union has a massive deficit to fill. Just look at the numbers. US military aid to Ukraine is worth $65 billion. US aid, $65 billion. European aid is $51 billion. And that is the combined effort of 27 plus EU countries. 27 plus countries, 27 of the EU and the other Europeans. So the sheer volume of American support makes it hard to replace. Same with the type of equipment. The US Army has a lot of items in surplus, like aircraft, Humvees and rockets, so they can spare and they can share this surplus with Ukraine's military. But the Europeans don't have such a stock. So how will they replace it? In the long run, maybe they can, but in 6 months, it looks like an impossible mission, which is why betting on Europe is a risk. Zelensky will be tempted to fight with European support, but if it backfires, he will lose more land. So his first option, that is depending only on the Europeans, is risky. The second option is to play nice with America, basically agree to join peace talks and to make concessions. Zelensky says he's open to a deal, but he's insisting on one demand. He wants America to provide security guarantees.
The lack of security guarantees for Ukraine 11 years ago allowed Russia to begin with the occupation of Crimea and the war in Donbass. Later, the absence of security guarantees enabled Russia to launch a full-scale invasion. And now, due to the lack of clear security guarantees, Russia is keeping this war ongoing.
But Trump is not open to it. His position was explained by Vice President J.D. Vance. Vance says the minerals deal, the one that they wanted to sign last week, is the best guarantee.
If you want real security guarantees, if you want to actually ensure that Vladimir Putin does not invade Ukraine again, the very best security guarantee is to give Americans economic upside in the future of Ukraine.
So Zelensky has two options. One is to bet on European support, and the second is to begin talks, make concessions to appease Donald Trump. Both these options have downsides. Let's see which way he goes. So Trump has stopped military aid to Ukraine and positioned himself directly against Europe. This is clearly a rift in the Western alliance. And Europe is faced with some existential questions. Questions like, how do they respond to this? And how do they ensure their own security? They're working on some obvious solutions. For starters, Europe is planning to pick up the tab to pay for their defense. They plan to ramp up military spending, both for Ukraine and for themselves. Two things have happened in quick succession. First, a new bank was announced on Sunday. It's called the Defense, Security and Resilience Bank, affectionately referred to as a bomb bank. The bank will arrange for funds so that Europe can borrow money to buy bombs. And of course, other arms and ammunition, they can buy that too. That was step one. Step two took place today.
We are in an era of rearmament. And Europe is ready to massively boost its defense spending, both to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security. Europe is ready to assume its responsibilities. Rearm Europe could mobilize close to 800 billion euros of defense expenditures for a safe and resilient Europe. We will, of course, continue working closely with our partners in NATO. This is a moment for Europe, and we are ready to step up.
That was Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, effectively the head of the European Union. She boldly stated that Europe is ready to step up and mobilize 800 billion euros. This is part of a grand Rearm Europe plan. She made this grand announcement earlier today. Of course, there's always a disclaimer. 800 billion is a projection. It is the maximum possible amount. Only if every EU member chips in. And this amount will be spread over 4 years. It won't be available today or tomorrow. 650 billion will be raised by EU member states by increasing their defense budgets over time, and the remaining 150 billion will be in the form of loans.
The second proposal will be a new instrument. It will provide 150 billion euros of loans to member states for defense investment. This is about basically spending better and spending together. This will help member states to pool demand and to buy together. And of course, with this equipment, member states can massively step up their support to Ukraine. So immediate military equipment for Ukraine.
This sounds good in theory. 150 billion is not a paltry sum. Since the Russia-Ukraine war began, Kyiv has received about 126 billion euros in military aid. from both the US and Europe. And this is just the military aid over the course of around 3 years. Now, Europe is unleashing $150 billion. If enough of this goes to Ukraine, it could theoretically sustain the war. Again, that's a big if. So Kyiv should not get its hopes up. But still, it shows that Europe is getting serious by mobilizing that kind of money. However, the real question still remains, will this 800 billion euro plan work? And will it be enough for Europe to cut its dependencies on the US? Probably not. Here's why I say this. As I mentioned, the 800 billion euros will be spent over 4 years. So that's 200 billion euros a year. Let's add some money from the new bomb bank to this. Let's say 10 billion every year. That comes to 210 billion euros per year, or about $220 billion in a year. It sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but it doesn't come close to what the US spends. Look at this chart of NATO spending in 2024. It's how much each NATO member spent on defense. On top, of course, is the US. They spent over $967 billion, which is more than 4 times what Europe is proposing now. Clearly, the US is a military behemoth. It outspends all NATO allies put together twice over. So replacing America is pretty much impossible right now. Europe will have to come up with far more money if it ever hopes to decouple with the United States. The new plan is definitely a start, but it will have to keep ramping up spending for way more than 4 years. On the plus side, Europe has some excellent defense firms already, like Dassault Aviation in France, Rheinmetall in Germany, Saab in Sweden, and BAE Systems in the UK. All of these are quality firms, but they will have to expand. They will have to diversify their offerings while cutting their reliance on American components. It's a tough ask. It will take decades. But if the Europeans are serious about their security, they will have to commit to all of this. Because the world order is changing and Europe has been thrust into the rain without their old American security umbrella.
No room left for Mexico or for Canada. They go into effect tomorrow. And China also had an additional 10, so it's 10 plus 10.
Yeah. It'll be 20% on China now. How high are you willing to go against China?
Well, I can't say it.
If the U.S. has ulterior motives and insists on fighting a tariff war, trade war, or any other war, China will respond in kind.
Donald Trump has struck again. Global stock markets are in turmoil because the US president is escalating his trade war. Starting today, imports from Mexico, Canada, and China will face higher taxes in the United States. Canada and China have hit back with retaliatory tariffs. Mexico, too, plans to counter the US. But for the wider global economy, Trump's trade war spells chaos. Although, of course, Trump does not see it in that way. He believes that he's punishing those who took advantage of America.
It's going to be very costly for people to take advantage of this country. They can't come in and steal our money and steal our jobs and take our factories and take our businesses and expect not to be punished. And they're being punished by tariffs.
If you want to sell in America, build in America. That is the message from President Donald Trump. And these are the taxes that he has imposed. Goods from Canada and Mexico face 25% tariff, 25% for Canada and Mexico. Chinese imports will be taxed at 20%, and these tariffs are already in effect. They're already in place. So for all imports from these 3 countries, Mexico, Canada, and China, higher taxes already apply. Now let's tell you about the goods that will be impacted. More than 40% of all US imports, that's 40%, that's roughly $1.5 trillion worth of goods. These are products that America imports every year, involving nearly all sectors of the US economy, from retail to the restaurant business, to car manufacturing, consumer electronics, even agricultural products. Trump's tariffs are likely to hit everyone and everywhere. So how can they be avoided? According to Donald Trump, there is only one way out. Build your factories in America. Commit to more investment in the US. During his address yesterday, Trump targeted both Mexico and Canada on this.
I would just say this to people in Canada or Mexico: if they're going to build car plants, the people that are doing them are much better off building here, because we have the market. We're the market where they sell the most.
Remember, Trump has tried to punish Mexico and Canada before. He did it last month, imposed these same tariffs, but then they struck last-minute deals and the crisis was averted. This time, though, there were no negotiations. President Trump simply announced the new taxes and gave no time to US allies to reason with him. So now they're responding in kind. Canada was the first to impose retaliatory tariffs.
Let's be clear. If Trump is imposing tariffs, we're ready. We are ready with $155 billion worth of tariffs, and we're ready with the first tranche of tariffs, which is $30 billion, which is already known.
A short while back, we heard from Mexico as well. Just like Canada, they plan to counter Trump tariffs with retaliatory taxes. And China is doing the same thing. Beijing has imposed countermeasures. It is targeting a range of American imports, from agriculture to food products. China plans to levy a 15% tariff on them. And it may not stop there. China could also raise these taxes or target more American imports. It has declared that it is prepared to fight back.
We are willing to resolve international concerns through dialogue and consultation with the U.S. on the basis of mutual respect, equality, and reciprocity. However, we will never accept pressure or threats and will firmly safeguard our national sovereignty, security, and development interests.
So Trump is ramping up pressure. Mexico, Canada, and China are countering with tit-for-tat moves. There is no room for doubt. Trump's America is waging a full-blown trade war, that too on multiple fronts. Trump supporters back him, of course. They see this as a tough but necessary step to create jobs. But Trump's policies will strain American households too. U.S. tariffs are at their highest since 1943. They would push up household expenses significantly by as much as $2,000 a year. Stock tanked. Dow Jones and S&P fell by more than 1%, and global markets are reeling. UK's FTSE 100 was trading in the red this afternoon. Same with the Asian stocks. Indian markets also took a hit. The Nifty 50 reported losses. This index tracks India's top 50 companies, and it has been struggling. The Nifty has fallen for 10 straight days now, which is the longest losing streak in 3 decades. 5 out of 13 major sectors recorded losses. Experts say Trump's actions are pressuring Indian markets, and Trump says he's not done yet. So brace for more turmoil, because the US president plans to expand his tariffs and target more American partners. So the tariffs have come into effect. We are officially in a trade war. But what does this mean for people in America, or indeed for people everywhere? What does it mean for them? What is the impact of these moves? We have identified 4 main ones. And these don't just cover the financial side of things, they also look at the politics. Impact number 1 would be inflation everywhere. This will likely be the immediate fallout. When a tariff is imposed, other countries don't pay it. Importers in your country pay it. And they transfer the burden to you, the final buyer, and this will happen in America as well. The goods they import will become more expensive, and the burden of that will fall on American people. They will have to pay more. S&P 500 has released an assessment. They say US inflation could rise by 0.5 to 0.7%. For an economy like America, this is quite significant. So the American consumer will suffer. No two ways about it. Meanwhile, other countries will also retaliate. They too will impose tariffs on US goods. And that will lead to rising inflation in those countries as well. The end result? Us, the consumers, lose out everywhere. Impact number 2 is a global realignment. Mexico and Canada are close US allies, especially Canada. The Canadians have fought multiple wars alongside America. But the tariffs have flipped a switch. Canadian leaders are attacking the US. Ordinary Canadians are booing the US national anthem. So the old warmth is missing. And we could see something similar in Europe. The EU commissioners visited India last week. They're looking for new trade partners in the world. Even India and China are working on a reset. They have agreed to normalize bilateral ties. Remember, experts predicted this last year. They said Donald Trump's actions would push India and China together. And to some extent, it is happening. All of this suggests a global realignment. You've got old allies falling out and new partnerships being forged. Which brings us to impact number 3, a drag on global growth. That too at the worst possible time. Look at the forecast for 2025 and 2026. The global economy is projected to grow by 3.3%. This is below par for the world. From the year 2000 to 2019, the average growth was 3.7%. Now it's projected to be 3.3%. After the pandemic, we have lost that momentum. The tariffs will add to our woes. In the US, they are expected to slow down GDP growth. By how much? Almost 0.6% this year. And this is not some magical projection. It is backed by empirical evidence. In 2019, Donald Trump triggered a similar trade war with China. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, says that it reduced global GDP growth by 0.8% that year. And this year, 2025, could be worse because we had a global pandemic in between. Major economies have been slow to rebound. They're still recovering. The likes of China are growing sluggishly. The likes of India are losing that initial momentum. So it's the worst time to rock the boat. That too for no logical reason whatsoever. And now to the final impact, an assault on free trade ideas. You see, in the last few decades, there was a clear consensus. Free trade is the way to go. Everyone seemed to agree. Yes, it will pinch in the short term, but in the long run, economies and countries will benefit. This was the established way of thinking. The US themselves played a key role in promoting this idea. But Donald Trump thinks differently. His tariff policy is just protectionism 2.0. It runs counter to established trade ideas. For example, look at his threat of reciprocal tariffs. If you impose 20%, I impose 20%. That is reciprocal tariffs in a nutshell. That's what it means. But it ignores ground realities in other countries. America has a well-developed industrial base. A Bangladesh or a Kenya does not have that. So naturally, the tariffs on these countries will have to be different. That was the established way of thinking. But Trump is ripping it up. His message to the world is clear: make in America or face crippling tariffs. This will have long-term implications for the world, especially if this thinking is embraced by Trump's party, the Republican Party. Historically, they have been free trade proponents, but Trump is dragging them to protectionism. As for other countries, it's certainly a challenging time for them, which is also why they must band up. They must recommit to free trade. We are not saying the existing system is perfect, but it's better than what Trump is proposing. He is imposing a system of tariffs, trade wars, and inflation. For our next story, let's go back in history. The year was 1987. Donald Trump landed in Moscow. It was his first trip to Russia. Later, he wrote about it in his book. Trump called it an extraordinary experience. He stayed in top-tier hotels, he was wined and dined by Soviet officials, and he toured for sites to build a hotel. Not much came out of the trip, though, but Trump flew back to the US energized. Suddenly, politics was on his mind. He tried to run for president that same year, in 1987. He pushed for a Republican nomination, but he failed. The question here is, what exactly happened on this trip? What made Donald Trump turn to politics? And this question has been around for years. Now, an ex-Soviet officer says that he has the answer. His name is Alnur Musayev. He says the KGB recruited Donald Trump in 1987 during the same trip. The KGB, as you would know, was the Soviet Union's main spy agency. And Musayev says they cultivated Donald Trump. They also gave him a code name, Krasnov. That's what he claims. And that's what all of this is, just claims without proof. So take it with a sack of salt. Having said that, such claims have been circulating for a while, including questions like, is Donald Trump a Russian agent? Is he an asset? Is that why he's aligning with Russia? Interestingly, Trump's Russia connection is older than this, older than his visit in 1987. It actually began in 1977. That's when Donald Trump married Ivana Zelnikova. She was a Czech model. And that put him on the Russian radar. Cold War archives show that Donald Trump was being spied upon. A decade later, he landed in Russia. Several KGB operatives met him. They showed him around. There's even a famous photo from this trip. It shows Trump and his wife posing in St. Petersburg. And this was not just sightseeing. Trump had a goal. He wanted to build a hotel in Moscow. And not just any hotel, a joint venture with the Kremlin. That's what he wanted. The deal did not work out, though. But reports suggest that Soviet officials flattered Trump. They apparently had an idea for him, that he should run for president. As history shows, that idea did not fade away. Trump returned to the US and took out full-page ads in major newspapers. Do you know what the ads were about? It was basically an open letter to Americans, a letter that suggested that the US should stop defending other countries, especially those who can pay for their own defense. Does it ring a bell? It should, because now he has turned it into American policy. But back then, the ad was quite controversial. It was seen as a jab at the then US President Ronald Reagan. Then by the year 2003, Trump was in deep financial trouble. His companies filed for bankruptcy. But within 2 years, things started looking better. Trump was back in business. Reports suggest it was because of Russian money. Investments flowing in from Moscow. In fact, in 2008, his eldest son even confirmed it. He said, and I quote, "Russians make up a pretty disproportionate cross-section of a lot of our assets." In 2013, Donald Trump spent 36 hours in Moscow. He wanted a meeting with the Russian president, but Vladimir Putin declined. That did not deter Trump. He still wanted a Trump Tower in Moscow, and he kept pushing for it until 2016. At the same time when he was running for president in 2016. He won that election, and Russia was accused of meddling in it, of trying to tip the scales in Trump's favor. Then a new dossier came out, raising further suspicions. It was called the Christopher Steele dossier. It detailed alleged connections between Trump and Russia. This dossier was later discredited, but an inquiry was launched nonetheless, an investigation led by a man called Robert Mueller. It focused on the charges of collusion between Trump's campaign and Russia. That's what they investigated. The Mueller report did not find a smoking gun, no proof of collusion. But it did not exonerate Donald Trump either. Now, irrespective of all of this, Trump continued to have an almost public romance with Vladimir Putin. He openly praises the Russian president. He often sides with him. In fact, look at the recent peace talks on Ukraine. Trump is pushing for concessions that align with Russia's demands. Now, to be fair, none of this proves that Trump is a Russian agent. He's more likely just enamored with Putin, as he is with most strongmen, including Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un. Plus, he's not the only US president to be pally with Putin. George W. Bush had quite the relationship with the Russian president. He drove Putin around. He danced with him on stage. He even claimed that he saw Putin's soul. So what is the verdict? Is Trump a Russian spy or just a Russian sympathizer? You see, he's the opposite of subtle. He wears his loyalty on his sleeve, not the typical traits of an asset. Curiously, Russia seems to have had a strange, almost magnetic pull on Trump for decades. Maybe it was the flattery, maybe it was the promise of a deal that never quite materialized, or maybe Trump was never really playing the game. He was being played. Amid all this geopolitical turmoil, one man is trying to play mediator, stepping in with some very old-fashioned diplomacy. Britain's King Charles III. First, he met Ukraine's President Zelensky, offered him some moral support after the White House showdown. Then Charles met Canada's ongoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, presumably to lend him a shoulder to cry on. Meanwhile, Charles is also reaching out to Donald Trump. The British monarch has invited Trump for an unprecedented second state visit. Charles seems desperate to be part of the action. But isn't he crossing the line? After all, the age of kings is over. So what on earth can Charles really accomplish with his antics? Our next report takes a closer look.
Sometimes it can be nice to have a mascot, a cheerleader for your team, a representation of your culture. But what happens when that mascot starts getting too involved? When it starts sitting in on important meetings and saying it's determined to play a part? This should be a cause for concern in the UK, because their antiquated mascot, their king, is stepping into the limelight, inserting himself into the wild world of geopolitics. Britain's King Charles III had two high-profile meetings over the last 2 days. On Sunday, he met with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, and yesterday he sat down with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The meeting with Zelensky was a show of support, a morale booster, after the horror of Zelensky's meeting with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance.
Very disrespectful to the country.
So the meeting seemed to be within the ambit of mascot duties. But the meeting with Trudeau was strange. Here's Canada's outgoing Prime Minister before the meeting.
I look forward to sitting down with His Majesty tomorrow. As always, we will discuss matters of importance to Canada and to Canadians, and I can tell you that nothing seems more important to Canadians right now than standing up for our sovereignty and our independence as a nation.
Trudeau basically said he was going to complain to Charles about the bullying by Donald Trump. As you know, Trump has been mocking Canada relentlessly, calling it the 51st American state. So it seems Trudeau decided to complain. Charles may seem like a strange person to complain to, but for some reason, even though it's 2025, he's still technically Canada's head of state. Though what he's going to do about the bullying is anyone's guess. We don't have the details of Trudeau's talks with Charles. They haven't been released, but it's safe to assume that the British monarch doesn't actually have the power to change anything. At most, he might bring it up diplomatically in the future, when he hosts Trump for an unprecedented second state visit.
So ask me to bear this letter and bring it to you.
The invitation was extended last Thursday, when British Prime Minister Keir Starmer met Trump at the White House.
This is a letter from His Majesty the King. It's an invitation for a second state visit. This is really special. This has never happened before. This is unprecedented. I think that just symbolises the strength of the relationship between us. So this is a very special letter. I think the last state visit was a tremendous success.
It was.
His Majesty the King wants to make this even better than that. So this is truly historic, an unprecedented second state visit, and he wants to.
That was Starmer flattering Trump with the unprecedented second state visit.
A letter from the King.
Starmer was using Charles and British pomp and pageantry to impress Trump, to get into his good books. It's probably the only acceptable way to use a monarch in this day and age. But there's always the danger that the old mascots might get too excited and start thinking their ceremonial role is something bigger. Britain would do well to remind Charles otherwise.
We're just in the third month of 2025, yet one name dominates the AI conversation. DeepSeek, the Chinese AI firm that rewrote the rules. DeepSeek launched low-cost AI models. They matched their Western rivals pound for pound. In doing so, they shook the very foundation of Silicon Valley. For years, cutting-edge AI meant one thing. It was built in America. But DeepSeek just flipped the script. And the ripples? They're being felt all the way to the top, especially by America's tech billionaires. Leading the pack is Elon Musk. The Tesla CEO lost around $90 billion this year, $90 billion. In February, his net worth was $433 billion. Right now, it is down to $349 billion. Then there is NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang. He lost about $20 billion. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg also lost $10 billion. So it's been a brutal losing streak. And the reason is DeepSeek's efficiency. It built a model with merely millions, challenging the billions that Silicon Valley pours into artificial intelligence. And that made investors question everything. Doubts crept in and the markets bled. But DeepSeek is not just eroding net worths, it is also reshaping AI. And the ripple effect is evident. I say that because other AI firms are following DeepSeek's lead. They're building their own models by using the process of distillation. So what exactly is distillation in artificial intelligence? It is like a teacher-student relationship, but for machines. First, there is a big, powerful AI model, that is a teacher. This model learns from massive amounts of data. Then its knowledge is passed down to a smaller, faster model. That is the student. This student learns to be efficient without needing heavy computing power. Think of it like reading a giant textbook and creating a smart summary. A summary that keeps all the key insights and is also much easier to process. Now, this technique is not new. AI has used it for years. But the models it produced were often weaker. That is what DeepSeek changed. DeepSeek trained its models on open source AI systems, the ones from Meta, Alibaba, and others. And the models it created, the models that DeepSeek created, were powerful and efficient. This is what has inspired other companies, especially small AI startups. They're now using distillation to create their own AI models. And bigger American firms are also doing it. They're scrambling to refine their models. Meanwhile, China is moving to protect its advantage. Let me show you this new report which says Beijing has a new diktat for its AI leaders. Avoid travel to the United States. That's what China is telling its AI top bosses. Don't go to the US. Why would they say that? Because of two main concerns. One, these leaders may reveal secret information. They may share their secret source to success. And the second concern, Beijing fears that the US may detain them and use them as bargaining chips. And this fear is not unfounded, by the way, because this has happened before. In 2018, a Huawei executive was detained in Canada. Her name is Meng Wanzhou, the daughter of Huawei's founder, and the chief financial officer of the company. She was detained in Canada at Washington's request, and she was charged with fraud. It triggered a long diplomatic standoff. So this time, China is being careful. It knows what's at stake, and it wants to shield its AI players and gains. Guess DeepSeek did not just disrupt the market, it redrew the battle lines in artificial intelligence. As China celebrates its newfound dominance, the US is playing catch-up, desperate to reclaim its edge. After all, this is not just about who builds the smartest AI, it's about who controls the future. And the way things are going, the AI Cold War has just begun. Now let's talk about Elon Musk. These days, he's usually in the news for his politics. He seems more powerful than ever. Through Doge, he's reshaping the US government. Doge stands for the Department of Government Efficiency. It is currently spearheading the effort to slash government bureaucracy. But Musk's politics could be hurting his businesses. This week, his net worth plunged by $90 billion. The stocks of his companies like Tesla are tumbling. The car maker is losing business in Europe and facing boycott calls from old fans. So is Musk's political ambition costing him his business empire? Our next report tells you.
Elon Musk was once a symbol of innovation. Whenever he revealed a Tesla car, it thrilled his fans. He even launched one into space and landed rockets back on Earth. Fast forward to 2025, and Musk is making headlines for all the wrong reasons. From a Nazi salute to Trump supporters to using Doge to undermine the US government.
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy.
And of course, those reckless social media posts. In MAGA land, they are essential fuel. But Musk's political choices could be affecting his businesses. Tesla, the crown jewel in Musk's portfolio of businesses, is facing challenges. Tesla sales have plummeted in Europe, falling by a whopping 45% in January. To make matters worse, the car maker is in the midst of a political storm. The Polish tourism minister has called for a boycott of Tesla. The reason? The politics of Elon Musk. Ahead of the elections in Germany, Musk threw his weight behind the AfD, the Alternative for Germany. It's a far-right political party with a questionable membership. Some of the AfD members are seen as Nazi sympathizers. But Musk endorsed the party anyway. The Poles took great offense, and for good reason. During the Second World War, Poland was Hitler's first target. The country lost 6 million people during the Second World War. Half of them were Jews. Yet Musk essentially told Germans to forget about it. He campaigned for the AfD during the elections. He told AfD supporters to move beyond their guilt over Nazi crimes. And it isn't just Poland. Musk has targeted other European leaders too. In the UK, he has attacked British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. And in Romania, he has promoted more far-right politicians. Many Tesla fans in Europe aren't too thrilled by this. In the Netherlands, a survey of Tesla owners revealed shocking results. A third of them have either sold their Teslas or are planning to do so because of Musk's comments. Some of them are putting up bumper stickers on their Teslas like this one. I bought this before Elon went crazy.
Arrest Elon Musk! Arrest Elon Musk!
In America too, the momentum against Musk is growing. Tesla dealerships and SpaceX offices have witnessed protests. In 2021, Musk claimed he prefers to stay out of politics. But 4 years later, he's not just in the news for his politics, he's part of the US government. His mercurial moves were applauded in business, but in politics, they are backfiring.
Now let me ask you a question. What is the mother of all diseases? You may say cancer or heart disease, but according to doctors, this disease is called the mother of all diseases, obesity. It is a global health epidemic. And obesity is only getting bigger. In less than 2 decades, more than half of the world's adult population and a third of children and teenagers will suffer from it. Before we tell you why, let's start with the basics. What is obesity? According to the World Health Organization, it is defined as the accumulation of excessive fat, and it is a major health risk. Obesity poses the threat of early death, high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and several other problems. Yet more than 2 billion adults and about 500 million children are overweight or obese the world over. And these figures have seen a rapid rise. Compare this with numbers from 1990. That's when more than 700 million adults and about 200 million children were suffering from the disease. The numbers have more than doubled over the past 3 decades or so. And if this trend continues, then by the year 2050, about 4 billion adults, or half the world's adult population, 4 billion people, and more than 700 million children, or a third of the world's young population, will be overweight or obese the world over. This is according to a new study of global data published in the Lancet journal. And it comes as a shock. The statistic is staggering, of course, but also because this trend is a strange transition. You see, for centuries, being underweight was the bigger problem. But now obesity is the most common form of malnutrition in many countries. It is a form of malnutrition. The number of underweight people has fallen, while obesity rates have increased. Now, 2/3 of the world is more obese than underweight. But despite this shift, one obvious link remains, and that is malnutrition. Malnutrition, in whichever form, mostly remains the disease of the poor. More than half of the world's obese adults live in just 8 countries. China leads the pack with 420 million overweight or obese people. This is followed by India, the world's most populous nation. And this is a curious case, India, where 800 million adults live on food subsidy, but 180 million people are obese. Look at the stark disparity. Then we have the US with its high junk food consumption. 172 million people in the US, million adults in the US, are obese. Now, barring a few exceptions, you will see that low and middle income countries carry the weight of the world, and this trend is not expected to change anytime soon. But in the coming years, its focus will shift. Rapid acceleration of obesity will move towards sub-Saharan Africa, where obesity will rise by 250%. And the worst hit will be Nigeria, where 141 million people, 141 million adults will be obese. This is a grim forecast, and it comes with seismic health and economic consequences. But why is it happening? Short answer, thanks to a global policy failure. Long answer, a range of problems: poor levels of healthcare and treatments, failure to boost levels of physical activity, rising prices of healthy food, cheap and widely available junk food, and soaring levels of pollution. All of this contributes to the trend. Sure, countries have been taking steps in the right direction. For instance, here in India, we've recently launched an anti-obesity campaign, and leading it was the Prime Minister himself. He urged people to consume less oil and challenge others to do the same. And this is a good way to boost collective action. It shows you intent at the very top of the government. But relying on behavioral change alone may not be enough. Solutions have to focus on structural change, on policies around food and environment. And most nations are lacking here. Citizens need walkable cities, marketing restrictions on junk food, higher taxes on sugary drinks, better access to healthy food, physical education in schools, and a special focus on low-income households who rarely have a choice in the matter. If governments are serious about tackling obesity, there is a range of urgent changes that need to be made. And as they say, there is no day like today to start. After all, it is the World Obesity Day today. Now let's talk about the star of the forest in the western Indian state of Gujarat. I'm talking about Vantara. This is the world's largest wildlife rescue center. It is home to more than 2,000 species and over 150,000 rescued animals. And this is where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was earlier this week. He inaugurated Vantara. He visited its state-of-the-art facilities and shared heartwarming moments with endangered and rescued animals. This comes at a time when animals are under threat the world over. Over the past 5 decades, global wildlife populations have shrunk by 73%. And now more than 41,000 species face extinction. Our next report tells you more.
This is Jamnagar, a city in the western Indian state of Gujarat. It is home to the world's largest oil refinery, and for years, that's what it was renowned for. But not anymore. Now, Jamnagar is also home to the world's largest wildlife rescue center, Vantara, meaning Star of the Forest. It's an effort launched by Anant Ambani, a scion of India's Reliance Group of Industries. With more than 2,000 species and over 150,000 rescued animals, Vantara is lauded as a haven for threatened, injured and endangered animals. Animals from the world over are rescued from poachers, circuses and other animal-human conflict situations and brought here for treatment. And that's where the Indian Prime Minister was during his 3-day visit to Gujarat. Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated the Vantara Animal Rescue Rehabilitation and Conservation Centre. He visited the Wildlife Hospital and the veterinary facilities equipped with state-of-the-art technology, including MRI, CT scans and ICUs. This may sound surprising, but at Vantara, it's not unusual to witness an Asiatic lion undergoing an MRI scan, or a leopard having life-saving surgery after being hit by a car in an operation theatre, or elephants in their jacuzzi or hydrotherapy pools, which support the recovery of elephants suffering from arthritis at the world's largest elephant hospital of its kind in the world. Which brings us to the elephant in the room. Amid all the work, Prime Minister Modi found time for some play as well. We're talking about these heartwarming moments. He played with semi-ferocious and mostly adorable cubs, sat face to face with a golden tiger, patted an okapi, and released parrots which were rescued by the centre. After all, rescue and rehabilitation take centre stage at Vantara, which is designed to mirror the natural, lush habitats of animals. But outside in the real world, animal habitats are increasingly under threat. Wildlife populations are collapsing. According to the World Wildlife Organization, the world over, more than 41,000 species are under the threat of extinction. Over the past 5 decades, global wildlife populations have shrunk by 73%, and this is the average. In South America, there has been a 95% decline in wildlife, followed by Africa with 76% and Asia with 60%. Comparatively, the West has witnessed lower falls. In North America, 39% and Europe, 35%. These numbers paint a gruesome picture because this is mostly due to human activity. Animal populations are plummeting thanks to human-induced climate change, poaching, trafficking, and shrinking natural habitats for industrial purposes. Experts call this a catastrophic loss for species, and this comes with devastating consequences. But all is not lost. With incisive conservation efforts, there is hope for positive change, and that's exactly what Vantara has set out to do.
The India-Australia semi-final has just ended, and good news, India have won. I'm sure most Indians were watching it live, especially with Virat Kohli leading the run chase. But India wasn't the only winner today. A bigger winner, you could say, is the UAE, because they will host the ICC Champions Trophy final, even though Pakistan is technically the official host. I mean, think about the irony. Pakistan is hosting their first ICC event in 30 years, but the final won't be hosted on their soil. It's among the many ironies that have triggered a meme fest online. Take a look.
मैं वादा करता हूं अपने हाथ से गला काटूंगा
देखा कहा फिर की मारत है मिल गवा हमका हमारे 11 खिलाड़ी
Now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. Violent clashes break out in the Israeli parliament between the families of Hamas hostages and security guards. Vibrant floats and dancers dazzle in Rio de Janeiro's carnival. And in the US, the police respond to an unusual 911 request for emergency donuts. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1861, Abraham Lincoln became the 16th US president. He won amid deep national divisions over slavery. His victory led to the secession of several southern states, sparking a civil war in the country. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
How are you guys?
Hi.
How are you? Well, we brought you some donuts.
Yes. Okay. You called us about donuts. We came to give you some donuts.
Yeah. Good. We've got blueberries.
Whoa.
They're awesome.
Bye. Have a good day.